Hello and welcome to another episode of the Off Grid podcast. A few of you guys have actually been saying hey and sharing your thoughts of what you think of the podcast, which I actually absolutely love because it's so nice to see the people that are actually listening to it. As opposed to just seeing this number like, yeah, you got a listener. It's like people going like, hey, this is what I thought about this podcast. This is what I found interesting. So if you are listening to this podcast, well, you are, but I'd love to hear what you think of this podcast and in the comments on Spotify. Just say, hey, this is what I think. And then I could be like, oh, what's that? We can like each other's comments and be like, super social media-y with each other. But yeah, it'd be really cool to hear from you guys, just to say hey and know who's listening and what you think of it. So this episode this week is with Oli France. He is an international speaker, adventurer, and founder of Wild Edge. Now, Oli used to work the corporate grind, but now he leads expeditions in dangerous, remote parts of the world. He has had his fair few exchanges of danger, including being on a bus surrounded by an Ethiopian mob that were angry about a football match in the Premier League. Don't know what you got to say about that, footballers. What was the score? Who knows? He's also been held at gunpoint in Iraq, and a suspected drug trafficker in Uzbekistan, where he was detained for 5 days. So he's really been through it and certainly experienced a lot of life and a lot of the world. And in this conversation, we talk about how quitting his corporate job that made him miserable led him to becoming an expedition leader, and how to diffuse dangerous encounters like in Ethiopia and a serious earthquake that he experienced in Indonesia. Also, we talk about Ollie's yearning for chaos and his determination to live a full life, and the unseen side of struggle and sacrifice to create this life of adventure for himself. Lastly, we also talk about the dangers of technology and convenience in English society that is designed for comfort, and how we lose our sense of struggle and ultimately what makes us feel human. So we'll go straight into the podcast. I hope you guys love this episode as much as I did, and let's get into it. The Off Grid podcast.
Ollie, hey mate, thank you very much for joining me on my podcast. It's great to have you here, mate. How's it all going? And what you've been up to the last couple of weeks or so? You've been out of the UK, so welcome back.
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Really good to be here. Appreciate the invitation. I'm just back from Sweden and Norway. Been a proper dreamy trip, heading up into the Swedish wilderness. We stayed in this off-grid cabin. This was a bit of a family adventure, and then went over into the Norwegian fjords. So it's been 2.5 weeks of just proper family adventures, running, walking, canoeing, wild swimming in the fjords, waterfalls. I'm all over that. So it's been a very dreamy 2.5 weeks, and now I'm just trying to get the cogs turning in my brain again.
Yeah, you're like back home, like, right, okay, what's for dinner and what are we doing this week?
Yeah, exactly. Dealing with emails again, figuring out modern life.
Yeah, where you just do that one click, it's like 500 misread emails. You're like, oh, welcome back.
Yeah, exactly.
Mate, I really wanted to start this off all the way back, if that's all right with you. I wanted to go back to 2015 when you quit your corporate job and, like any normal person, decided to trek from Hong Kong to Istanbul.
Yeah.
What was it that caused you to make that big change in your life at that time?
So I had gone to university and studied outdoor leadership, and spent a lot of my summers working and traveling overseas in the Middle East, in Africa, North America, in Australia, Asia. and done that for the best part of 4 years, and then landed in this sort of corporate role. I got back to the UK, checked the bank balance, thought, okay, I'll get a proper job. Landed in this job, absolutely hated it. Spent 2 years there. That is my single biggest endurance test to date. Um, and got to the end of that 2 year period, and by that point I was literally a shell of myself, because I wasn't following this passion anymore. I was doing something I wasn't really interested in. Was unmotivated, lethargic. I was missing out on everything I wanted to do, and it got to the point where actually I wasn't very good at my job because I wasn't passionate about it, and I thought I need to get out of this before I self-implode. So I quit the job in 2015, almost exactly 10 years ago, to us speaking now. And it was a hard decision at the time, because you can see this ladder of progression already. You've got the car, you've got the bonus scheme, you've got, all these perks, a salary, which is, first time I'd had a salary job, etc. And I threw it all behind. I left it all behind. The timing was terrible. We just bought a house, me and my fiance. We were doing this big renovation, and we had a wedding upcoming already, and so I quit it all, with no prospects of future work, and thought I need to get back to doing what I love, in order to get my life back on track, essentially. And I came up with this plan to journey from Hong Kong to Istanbul in the middle of winter on my own, climbing mountains in every country. I put a lot of work into making this expedition happen, but there was still a hell of a lot of unknowns. It would be a journey of 8,000 miles. It would take me through 11 countries. I had a couple of visas and a couple of early plans, but I just needed to get out into the world and sort of test myself. And I also had in the back of my mind that if I could pull off this really big project, then hopefully that could be the basis for building a career in adventure. So that's kind of the backstory, and that's what led me to quitting the job and embarking on that trip.
That is a bold move, but it sounds like it came out of a place of desperation. And I've been in a similar spot before where I've just convinced myself that I need to get a corporate job, that I need to follow this like for me what would be a normal path that would be expected of me, I think, in the people around me. What was that moment for you when you were like, this is enough? Was it like a gradual thing that slowly ate away at you? Because you mentioned you're like a shell of a man by the end of it, or was there this big realization where you were like, hang on a sec, my life's out of alignment here?
It was probably more gradual, really, and I think it usually is. It's you just slowly absorbed into this world where that becomes your reality and your normal. And I think when you accept something as a fixed reality, is quite dangerous, because then you get more fearful of change and uncertainty. And actually, we live in a very changeable world. So I just got very comfortable in that job. But also, I realized that when I was speaking to people about work, it was generally a very negative way. It was a remote position, this job, before remote positions were a thing. So that gave me freedom. And what I did with that was very, very little. I'd just sit around. I would be very unmotivated. I would not do as much work as I should be doing. My one thing I'd look forward to each day was getting out for a run or a ride or going to the gym or something like that. Otherwise, I was just pretty miserable. Yeah, it just got to the point where I thought, I'm in a really deep funk here, and I need to drag myself out of it. And nobody's going to do that for you. You might get a couple of friends or family saying things aren't right, but ultimately you have to take that step yourself. You've got to do it, and I knew I had to do it, and it's not easy, actually. But for me, it involved making that bold decision. But I think it got to the point where I actually started to get a couple of calls from the boss, and he's like, you're not doing great, are you? And so I realized, well, if I don't quit, they'll probably end up firing me anyway. So anyway, I just got out of that job, and 100% the best decision I've ever made.
Yeah, that's a tough one when you know that you've got to go, and in a way it feels like there's like this calling, this like inner there's this inner voice in you that's just like, this is not for me. I need to get out of here and go and like yearn for adventure in a way. And as I was doing my research for this episode and looking into you, you clearly have this yearning, or almost like a maybe obsession for adventure. This is something that you need in your life to feel like alive.
Yeah.
And you're crazy busy. You're on podcasts. You're here, there, everywhere. It was almost overwhelming preparing for this episode, because I was like, where do I start? You've been all over the world. You've talked on so many podcasts. You're doing talks for loads of different businesses across the world. What's it like now for you to turn your hobby into a job? What are the actual realities of that?
Yeah. So the first thing is there is no blueprint for a job like this. I quit that job. I had no idea. There was no grand plan. I wish I could say there was a grand plan. There wasn't. All I knew was I needed to get out of it. And so this 10-year journey from quitting that job in July 2015 has been involved a hell of a lot of figuring out, trying lots of different things, dabbling in different side hustles, side projects, gradually figuring out what I enjoy the most, and then eventually and ultimately how I can build this into a career. Because if I can't find a way to sustain myself, it's not going to be viable. I'd love to just explore the world constantly, but that's not really a job, unfortunately. You need a bit more structure to it. So it's involved, lots of experimentation, and ultimately the big thing I got into once I completed that journey in Asia was guiding teams overseas. And so I started to get hired for as an expedition leader, and I was going off to all kinds of remote and hostile and wild places around the world, and leading teams in Iraq and Somalia and Yemen and Syria. And there was a period where I was extremely busy, and I'd be in 15 countries a year, leading expeditions every month. It was just non-stop, the rate of adventure, and it's highly addictive. It's extremely fun. You meeting all kinds of individuals from all walks of life, be they Swiss billionaires or ex-CIA officers or reformed criminals or terminal cancer patients or drag queens or spies, you name it. I've met them along the way. And so it's a very exciting thing that I found myself doing, and I just constantly wanted more. It's great. I also realized, of course, that I also have a wife. We were married, but then we had children, and so there needs to be a bit of balance there. So I started to do other things outside of the expeditions, which includes the speaking work. That's been a very gradual process. It's taken 9 years essentially of work to get to where I'm at now, speaking to bigger companies on a more regular basis. And so that's also involved a lot of experimentation. I do work with brands as well. So, when I'm doing bigger expedition projects, solo ones or with a team, then I try and get sponsors on board with that. So I work with brands, I do speaking engagements, I do my expeditions, and then a couple of other bits and pieces here and there. But it's a busy wild ride. Nobody's sort of, once again, there's still no blueprint for this, but I think I've figured out a line of work which is very exciting. I get to travel a lot. I get to meet lots of interesting people. It aligns with the type of lifestyle I want to have, where I have some degree of freedom as well. And so, yeah, it's taken 10 years to get here, but right now I'm really enjoying it.
That gradual process over a decade is just amazing persistence to keep going. And I think a lot of people who look at you and what you do with your job, they think, oh, I'd love to do that. You go and see the world and go and give talks about what you've learned. From that guy that trekked from Hong Kong to Istanbul, obviously there's a long period of time of 10 years after that point. So that felt like the first domino that kind of got fully and got the momentum going. But how did you actually create a career for yourself as opposed to just going on expeditions as a hobby?
So I realized that it's going to be very hard to create a career just going on your own projects. I needed to start working as a leader. I was also passionate about that. I'd done that in my younger years, sort of sports coaching and things, and working overseas in that role. And so I saw this world of expedition leadership as something really exciting, and now I can turn my own passion into a job. And so I started networking. I started meeting, expedition companies who were looking for leaders. I built relationships. They started to hire me, and I became somebody they trusted and came back to. And then very quickly, I'm getting offers for all kinds of interesting expeditions. It was quite amazing for somebody who's young and hungry. Now I'm getting, Excel spreadsheets with a list of possible expeditions that I could do throughout the year. And it could be any number of countries, and I can just cherry pick, okay, I'll go to Kyrgyzstan, I'll go to Namibia, I'll go to Syria, and sort of pick out the expeditions I want to do. And that was sort of the peak of it. But so that was how I, started to make make an income through expeditions, and then I built those other things around that, because so I wasn't away 12 months of the year, basically.
Wow. I mean, that just sounds like almost like a dream state where you've got this Excel spreadsheet. I mean, I hate Excel spreadsheets, but
Yeah,
that one sounds like
that was an
amazing.
exciting one.
Yeah.
But I will say as well, and you touched on it before, you said that thing of, well, probably a lot of people will look and say, well, that sounds like a dream job and everything like that. It's my dream job. For a lot of people, though, actually, the reality of it would be the opposite of fun. And there are a lot of hardships involved, and there's been so many sacrifices over the years that most people wouldn't want to go through. I think over the period of 10 years, where you're not getting quite as much work, and some of the work is low paid, and you can get to the end of the year and you're sort of just about getting by, and you're making sacrifices, and you're missing events at home, and it's high pressure and it's high stress. And in those expeditions, you're ultimately responsible for people's lives, and that comes with its own challenges as well. So yeah, I just want to be careful not to suggest that it's all perfect, and there are many challenges under the surface. It's not just living life and traveling the globe constantly.
Mate, that's such a good point to make because, we're all showing ourselves online as like, yeah, I got everything under control, like
Yeah.
everything's sorted. Here's my like shiny brand and everything. But people look at your life from the outside and might think like, oh, that looks really great, but there's so much that they don't see. And particularly for you, who's now a decade into the game, there's all that workload that comes before the big brand of Wild Edge and doing these big talks in front of companies. There's so much that goes into that, and I get a
Yeah.
sense from you that you sort of thrive in the chaos of life, that you're someone that almost seeks it in a way, and a lot of your expeditions are in dangerous places. Like you've had Ethiopian mobs surround a bus that you're in, you've been held at gunpoint in Iraq, you've been suspected as a drug trafficker in Uzbekistan and detained for 5 days.
Mm.
Do you have an appetite for chaos and danger?
I guess I do. Yeah. To be honest, there is something exciting about it, and something addictive about it. For me, I don't want to live life on a flat line. I don't want to just live an ordinary life. I think we live in this incredible, complex, remarkable, inspiring world, and I really want to see and experience as much as I possibly can in this one life that I've got, that we've all got. So that's the driving force, really. I just want to live a really full life, and that comes with seeing incredible things, and it also comes with seeing the opposite. I think every journey, and every country and every experience, there is a light and a shade. There are remarkable moments, but there are also dark and challenging moments, and I do enjoy both. And it's strange. I almost feel at my best and at my fullest and at my most present in those more chaotic moments. You know, I feel strangely calm in those moments, and I enjoy trying to navigate those moments in an effective way. There's something really liberating about that, I think. So, you know, for example, I've been doing these expeditions for a number of years, and we'd had a lot of incidents and, you know, near misses and militia groups and guns and interrogations and all sorts. And then I was actually on a holiday in Indonesia. I'd just been leading an expedition in Cambodia, and then I went out and met my wife in Indonesia. We were on the island of Lombok, and that was meant to be a holiday. We were out snorkeling throughout the day. We'd met some friends. We were sitting in the restaurant at night and eating some food, and then it was really weird. Everything. So I don't know to this day what it was that I sensed, but I stood up in the middle of a restaurant. I just stood up, and everyone sort of turned around and looked. And then about a second later, an earthquake started. And it was so surreal. I don't know if I'd heard something or if there was some instinct or something, but I'd stood up anyway. And then a second later, this earthquake started, and it was a major earthquake, a magnitude 7 earthquake on this island of Lombok. We were close to the epicenter. And everybody went outside. You've now got the hotel is shaking. Everything's falling off the walls. Glasses are smashing. People are screaming. The swimming pool is sloshing from side to side as though it's a bucket of water. You know, it's chaos. You're just looking at the hotel, waiting for it to collapse. It didn't, miraculously. But and then you've got people fleeing up the hillside and things. And for some reason, I did feel really quite relaxed in that moment while all this chaos was going on. I just found myself feeling relaxed. I was processing the moment. I was thinking about what we need to do. And I realized very quickly that lots of the locals nearby were fleeing up a hillside and trying to evacuate for a potential tsunami risk. And I thought, nobody's getting hold of this situation here. You know, the hotel owner's not doing anything. The staff aren't doing anything. Where it's a complete communications blackout. We've no idea if there's a tsunami risk. We don't know any news, anything like that. But somebody needs to get control of the situation. And so I used, I suppose, those years of expedition experience to be that person and to get everyone together and say, right, this is what we're going to do. Everybody, we need to get up the hillside now. Go and grab some food and water for your room right now. We'll meet back here in 1 minute, and then we're going to go up the hillside until we can get some solid information. And then we were relaying information. We were trying to keep people calm, keep people relaxed. And that was, I think, those moments where I feel at my absolute most present. You know, you're feeling things, you're sensing things. In a strange way, I feel a similar thing on stage, where no matter how you go into it, what your mood is, how you've slept, you know, if you've got a bit of a cold, once you're stood up on that stage, you're at the mercy of the crowd that's all staring at you with expectancy that you're going to deliver something powerful or memorable or important to say. And it sharpens you. I think it either really sharpens and heightens your senses, which is this great experience, or it can do the opposite and you have this sort of fight or flight response and it can be overwhelming. And that's come with time, by the way. I never used to feel like that, but now I just feel in this almost flow state, and it's what really excites me.
Yeah, it's amazing, this theme of just habituation throughout your life, where you've been in these situations before, and it's like you just go into that natural state, like a place that you're able to tap into at any moment when it's required. You mentioned how that was a natural disaster and something where you had to take control of that situation. Can you talk me through one of those dangerous situations where it's with humans, because they tend to be a lot more unpredictable. Like you're not sure what they're going to do or even what they want from you. So how do you diffuse those situations, and what's a circumstance you've been in where there's been real danger?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There have been many human interactions, and the challenge with humans is they are, as you say, highly unpredictable. People can be particularly emotionally charged. They could be very territorial if it's maybe a tribal thing. There could be other geopolitics at play, particularly if you're in sensitive areas. You could have militaries, you could have border guards, you could have hostile groups who simply don't want you to be there for some reason, or potentially have bad experiences with tourists before, and then that lands on you as a new group in the area. So there are many factors at play, and one of the big challenges is navigating that and planning towards it, because ultimately it is hard to plan towards. All you can really do is really build your background knowledge as to what might be going on in that particular region, having great local contacts who can give you valuable information, and then using that to make a plan. So to come to a story, I've traveled to, I mean, I could give a number of stories here, but one which stands out, I've traveled to Ethiopia a number of times, and we've had problems in some way or another every time we've been in Ethiopia, because it's a highly tribal country. And if you go to the wrong part of the country, then you're going to face hostility potentially, which I have on pretty much every occasion I've been there in certain regions. And so what happened on this particular expedition was I got wind of something that was kicking off in the country, basically. And it all started from a Premier League football match, bizarrely. So some locals have been watching United versus Arsenal in some Ethiopian bar. And I don't know what had happened in the match, but a brawl had started in the bar. A couple of people had been killed, and then within hours and days, that had then turned into nationwide civil unrest across the whole country. This really crazy situation. And so then, as we're traveling through the country, I'm leading a team of 16 people. We've just come from the remote northern desert. We'd spent a few days there, where we'd also had a couple of problems, but anyway. Then we're traveling towards the Somali border on a coach, essentially, to begin the next stage of the trip. And we were traveling through this northern part of Ethiopia, and I knew that this was bubbling along. And it's also obvious because we're seeing trucks with police, heavily armed police, traveling up and down the roads. You're getting curfews, so people are meant to be out at night. You're getting checkpoints up and down the road, and you're also getting a lot of just heavy atmosphere when you're traveling through the villages. And so we got to this village ultimately, and it was that classic scene of like a mob with pitchforks, except instead of pitchforks, they had machetes and sticks and bats and all kinds of things. And they blockaded the road in this village. And there we are on this road in this coach with all the tourists, all my group. And they surrounded the bus and they blocked the road. And so I'm, of course, thinking now as the leader, right, how on earth are we going to get out of this situation? Because it could turn bad very, very quickly.
Bloody hell, this is chaos.
Yeah, so it's a very tense situation. And I hate to say it, but if you're in a place like that and things escalate, it's going to be very, very hard to de-escalate them and to get everybody away safely. The natural end point, if it escalates, is some people are going to end up very hurt or worse. And so I realized two things. One that we're not the enemy here, because it's an intertribal rivalry, basically. It's this sort of civil unrest. And so we're not the enemy. But they don't necessarily see that at first. It's a very tribal area, but that we need to get across that message. Look, we're just tourists, we're just innocent people. But how do we get that message across? The other thing I realized was I'm not the person to do that, because if I go and try and communicate, I don't speak their language, they don't speak mine. It could escalate. People could get confused. So I very quickly had to relay a message to our trusted local guide, our local fixer, who is traveling with us, that we need to try and get this under control as quickly as possible. And there was this guy who'd sort of emerged as the leader of this mob. And so our local fixer, Abdul, this big guy in a big leather jacket, he always travels in a leather jacket for some reason, despite it being about 37 degrees. And so he sticks his head out, the coach, and I still to this day don't know what he'd said, but he spoke with such kind of gravity and urgency that the mob leader kind of yielded to him, and then they did ultimately let us pass. So what ultimately, you know, the story there is really understanding what the situation is and making a very fast decision, but making a decision rather than not making a decision. Indecision can be very dangerous in itself. You need to move forward and figuring out the best course of action. So that's what worked in that occasion.
Wow, what a story. I mean, that is just alarm bells ringing. Like, even listening to that story, I'm like, oh my God, that just sounds horrendous.
Yeah.
And yeah, clearly, if you've got a group to look after as well, you're the guy everyone's probably looking at in that situation to be like, okay, what are we doing? That's another component that you've got to deal with. Clearly, there's all this adventure, there's all this danger in your life, and it's all very exciting. But then you come home and you're back into society in the UK, and we're different here. We got technology, and you've got more and more children now using tech, more and more people staying indoors. Coming from the bloke who's doing a podcast from his living room on Zoom, but it will be in person soon enough. And what do you think the effect is of this, the impact of that on us as a wider society becoming more insular and technologified?
Yeah. Well, I think we are generally living far more comfortable lives, and I can understand why. It's throughout millennia, if you track back sort of human history, things have always been very, very uncertain, right? From, you know, living in jungles and caves where there could be predators lurking, and then you go through the ages and you've got wars and you've got tribes who might attack you, and you've got wild animals to worry about, and you've got plagues and all of those things. And you fast forward to this day, sort of as humans and the world has evolved, we've gradually eradicated risk. We've eradicated, you know, the risk of getting disease. That's a good thing for sure. We've eradicated, you know, the risks of traveling by road and traveling in the air, and even sort of physical risks such as sitting in the right office chair to make sure it's ergonomic and people don't get back problems. So, you know, gradually over time, that has happened to make humans more comfortable. And it's a human instinct to be comfortable. But I think also there is a greater human instinct of curiosity and exploration and wanting to see what's out there, see what's in the unknown. But I think more and more that side of our human personality has been broken down and diminished by this lure of comfort, because it's very appealing, isn't it? You know, it's highly appealing to live this very comfortable life. But what does that do to us? You know, if we spend all of our time indoors, if we go from our nicely heated house out into our air-conditioned car, out into the perfectly lit ambient office with the ergonomic chair, and spend all of your day doing that, and never really have that much hardship, I think we just lose a bit of our edge as sort of instinctive primal animals. I mean, there's so many things. Do we really need a highly advanced sports watch to tell us whether or not we've had a good night's sleep? You know, do you really need that? Or do we know, actually, if we've had a good night's sleep? We know, you know, we don't need a watch to tell us that. I know there's going to be people with watches who use them religiously.
They'll be throwing them out the window right now.
Hopefully, yeah. And do we need to check what the weather is right now when we could just step outside and feel what the breeze is like, feel what the humidity is like, feel what the temperature is like? You know, I think we just risk losing a bit of our instinct as humans. And I think what the potential danger is. People might be thinking, well, what's wrong with living a comfortable life? I think what the potential danger is, the world is evolving to become more complex and uncertain. And if we are not able to adapt to that change and be resilient and continue to be curious and push out into unknowns, we are at risk, I think, of falling behind and being left behind. And so I think we need to keep that human instinct dialed in. I think we need to experience moments of discomfort. I think we need to step out of our comfort zone. I think we ultimately need to feel human. And if we're not feeling human, then what's the point? What's the point of it all? We get one chance to see this incredible world. Why just sit inside a concrete box for the whole time?
Mate, thank you very much for sharing your insights, and you've got a real sense of not just talking about adventure, but what it can do for us and make us feel alive, make us feel human. So yeah, I've really loved having you on, and thanks for coming on to the pod, Ollie.
Pleasure, Jake. Really appreciate the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.